There was a day that the coleslaw was a little bit heavy on the red cabbage, so it kind of turned out pink, and the students kind of flip. It's like, whoa, this coleslaw looks different. Our food service staff that day engaged with the student, told her why, well, the farmers had a lot of red cabbage this week, and that's what we had, so this is what it looks like, but I think you should try it. It tastes the same, and she came back with like an empty tray and a big thumbs up, and now that student knows, like, it might look purple this week, or it might be green. We don't know.
Welcome to the 322nd installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Serving locally produced food in school cafeterias, known as farm to school, is one of those concepts that, like puppies and pizza, just about everyone thinks is a good idea. After all, it provides healthier food for young minds and bodies, while putting more money in the pockets of farmers. What's not to like? But there are numerous obstacles that stand in the way of connecting local farms and local schools on a consistent basis. For one thing, many of today's schools lack the kitchen facilities and staff to prepare food that's straight off the farm. In addition, tight budgets make it difficult to pay local farmers what they deserve. Major food service companies simply provide a cheaper, if less nutritious, product. And it can be difficult for a local farmer to know how best to approach a school nutrition director, and to know exactly how to match supply and demand and make regular deliveries. Finally, there's the fact that in the Midwest anyway, the prime growing season for items like fruits and vegetables and the regular school year don't exactly coincide. But in recent years, numerous school districts have overcome such obstacles to connect directly with farmers and make locally produced food more than a rarity on cafeteria tables. For example, more than 65% of U.S. school food authorities participating in the USDA's latest farm-to-school census, which took place during the 2018-2019 school year, reported that they were involved in farm-to-school activities. That represents over 42 million students. The number of Minnesota school districts engaged in farm-to-school practices rose from 18 in 2006 to 262 in 2019. Which impacts over 520,000 students. In Minnesota, one thing that's helped smooth the path between the vegetable plot and the lunch table has been increased support for farm-to-school initiatives via the State Department of Agriculture. For example, state farm-to-school and early care grants support school districts and early childhood education centers that want to buy and serve Minnesota agricultural products. In fiscal year 2024, the Ag Department expects to award up to $935,000 to reimburse school districts and early childhood education centers for buying Minnesota-grown and raised foods. School districts can also get state funding to purchase kitchen equipment that supports their handling and processing of locally sourced food. It should also be pointed out that farmers wishing to better match their growing season with the school calendar can apply for USDA Environmental Quality Incentives Program funds to erect hoop houses and other season-extending structures. A big reason such support is available is because groups like the Land Stewardship Project and the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy have been working hard during recent state legislative sessions to promote farm-to-school bills. For example, during the 2023 legislative session, we won a significant increase in funding for the state's farm-to-school initiative, and the Ag Department now has a staffer dedicated to this kind of work. Having a paid professional available to coordinate farm-to-school initiatives is important, and not just on the state level. For example, Amy Haig is the farm-to-school coordinator for the cooperative district that encompasses the central Minnesota communities of Hutchinson, Litchfield, and Dassel-Cokato. For the past few years, Amy has served as a link in the food chain connecting the schools and farmers in the region. That represents 12 kitchens and between 4,800 and 5,200 meals served in a given day. She regularly works with around 15 farmers, sourcing mostly produce but also some meat and dairy products. The schools have also started bringing in local maple syrup, honey, and dry beans. Haig estimates that on average, the food they buy directly from farms is within a 15 to 30-minute drive of the schools. At the peak of the farm-to-school season, which is usually in early fall, 80% of the school's vegetables and 100% of the beef is locally sourced. Amy estimates over the entire course of the school year, Between 25% to 35% of the food is from local farms. The Hutchinson, Litchfield, and Dassel-Cokato initiative has been called the gold standard of farm-to-school programs in the state, in no small part because they've dedicated staff time to its coordination. And Amy is a good fit for the job. She had worked in the classroom before, but even more importantly, she and her partner, Andy Temple, for a time raised vegetables in the area. That means Amy knows a lot about the challenges farmers face and also has lots of connections with the people raising food in the area. This summer, during a farm-to-school workshop and field day for farmers at Loon Organics in Hutchinson, farmer Laura Frericks-Cullip made it clear that having the local school as a wholesale market has been a financial boon for her family's vegetable operation. As part of the workshop, Amy Haig then led participants on a tour of a school in Hutchinson where she explained the expectations and logistics involved with delivering food direct from a farm to an institutional kitchen. Several weeks after the workshop, Amy sat down to talk to me about what's involved with developing and maintaining a successful farm-to-school program. She began our conversation by making it clear that a school can't just decide it's going to buy local one day and then expect a delivery the next. A good farm-to-school arrangement requires long-term planning on both sides of the coin.
Planning ahead, there's so many ways to have a farm-to-school program and so many scales of that. And I think for some communities, especially ones that are even smaller communities or more rural than the Hutchinson, Litchfield, Dassel-Cokato area, it works. If you find an apple grower in the heat of apple season and say, we want to take in all of your small apples or your seconds or whatever. But something that's important to me, and I think this is like my farmer at heart screaming through, is like direct purchases. Our preference is to buy straight from the farm so that the farmer gets the most benefit. There are things where, we're going to bring in some carrots this winter from another grower, and we are going to get those from a distributor because they're a little too far away. But when possible, I want to buy direct from that farmer to build that relationship, to know their story a little bit better so we can share that with the students eating their food. So if you want to do it that way, it does take a little bit of planning. I know that the vegetable farmers especially are making their decisions on seeds and quantity in December.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you go through this massive abundance of October, you kind of take a breath in November, and then you get right back to planning. There are things that have, good storage life, like potatoes and carrots and squash, that we can serve all winter. So it's not to say that everything is over now after frost, but and things like our proteins, our beef, and now some chicken, that will carry us through the winter too. But yeah, those conversations where they're, it's a growing season, not a year of raising animals. It's that growing season. Takes a lot of planning.
And pardon the pun, but it sounds like you, especially that first year or so, you kind of went for the low-hanging fruit. Like what's available, because you want to have success, a little bit of success right out of the chute. Especially with a school that's like, well, is this a good use of our funds and that kind of thing?
Yep.
Is that kind of way
Absolutely. Yeah, easy things. So there are things that we, think that the students love, like carrots, cucumbers, broccoli, cherry tomatoes. Bring those in first.
Yeah.
They also need minimal prep. So it gives our kitchen staff like a little bit of experience to see how orders might come in. One of the questions was from the staff was, how are we gonna wash all this stuff? And there's such a misconception that local stuff isn't gonna be washed. We're buying from professionals.
Right.
They are packaging it and washing it really, really, really great, just according to industry standards.
Right.
So once our kitchen team saw, comes in a wax box, fits on our shelf, all the beets are clean, all the potatoes are clean, all the carrots are pressure washed. This is awesome. So that was that big sigh of relief. So the first year we went for those easy things, kind of those things that could be used fresh. I had always heard that one of the reasons why schools couldn't serve local food or have a robust farm-to-school program was the lack of cooking infrastructure. And our 3 districts, I would say, had a pretty great infrastructure still in place to cook. We don't have, we're not ordering, we don't have a meal service that was ever providing food for our schools. So our schools all had mostly intact kitchens. We have, right off the bat, Leslie, the director, had applied for a small grant to get all of the districts, and now all of the kitchens have them, food processors, that can chop all of the cucumbers really quick and, dice the tomatoes or dice the carrots, dice the onions. We do fajita strips, with peppers and onions. So those pieces of equipment help, of course, when you're prepping vegetables for thousands of kids. And that was our first equipment purchase that we got grant money for, and then it has just gone up. We've purchased ovens with better technology and more cooler and freezer infrastructure, because that seems to be lacking when you can get just exactly what you need every week from the truck. You don't have a whole lot of capacity to freeze things while they're in peak or store like carrots and sweet potatoes and onions, that kind of thing. So yeah, all of our kitchens have kind of gotten their once over with new ovens and coolers and freezers and better equipment.
Well, and they talked about, when I was there visiting the Hutchinson School, the meatballer?
Yeah.
That was a key. I mean, just something as simple as that. You said that just made it possible to use locally produced beef. Is that right?
Yeah. We, it was kind of the last thing that we were purchasing using our commodity dollars was meatballs. And if it hadn't been for the meatballs, 100% of our beef would be local. So now that we have that meatball maker, it's a pretty fascinating machine. We can have meatballs for pasta. We can have meatballs for meatball subs. We can do like an Italian wedding type of soup. So it's just, it's that one more piece. If we needed to make burger patties, we could. But it's a good piece of kitchen infrastructure. And we share that.
Yeah.
Not every kitchen has everything.
Right.
But yeah, the meatball maker was a fun add this year. And it's part of the story.
Yeah.
When students are like, what? These are local meatballs even? Or what? 100% of our beef is locally raised. You're not going to win over every kid with broccoli or Brussels sprouts, even cherry tomatoes, things that I think would be a student favorite.
Right.
You're always going to bat like 50%.
Yeah.
There's going to be 50% that love it, 50% that are just a little cold on it. But when we have local burgers or meatballs, brats even, students, it smells different.
Yeah.
It's a far better product than they were getting before.
Yeah.
And the protein seems, I guess what I'm saying is the proteins seem like an easier reach for the students. It's a familiar food, and it's kind of a staple of at-home food, so they're familiar with it. And if they're familiar with the foods, we see them reach for those first. Yeah, the proteins are a good comfort thing for students.
So this fits in a little bit to something I'm really interested in, is how you do match what can be two ships passing in the night, which is the growing season in Minnesota and the school season, the school year. How have you handled that? That must be a pretty big challenge to kind of get those to overlap as much as possible.
We did chat about how that first year, we were just like, whatever's easy, whatever we can use. And that was a good learning year to see for all of our growers, when they're like, well, we would take some cherry tomatoes in July and August because we do feed students throughout the summertime. But what we really need is tenfold those cherry tomatoes in September.
Yeah.
So even some of our produce farmers have been able to plant a later succession for us, which I'm talking with those growers 2 or 3 times a week, and I'll even send them, I have it a task logged on my calendar of ask Laura and Joan if they'd squeeze in another succession of brassicas for us in the fall. Just remind them if they have the energy and the space, go wild with the broccoli.
Right.
If the farmers have space and energy, they'll throw in that late succession of cherry tomatoes in a high tunnel or of sweet peppers. So planning our menus kind of around, we know, September is just going to be wild. We're going to take in lots of variety. We'll take in what they have. Covered production space, like high tunnels and greenhouses, is going to be really helpful, of course, for those farmers. Yeah, I would say getting food at scale for only that September and October season is really difficult. ultimately, all we can do, my idea is I communicate with the farmers ballpark estimates of amounts that we could use. The nice thing is let's say one farmer can produce 40 pounds of cherry tomatoes a week. We have 12 kitchens in the 3 districts, so we can take all of those for sure. And we just might hit Hutch one week, Dascocato the next week, Litchfield the next, and just keep cycling. We do that with cucumbers, late season zucchini, things like carrots that we don't have to use immediately. Like, we just take those as they're available.
And you, I know Laura at Loon Organics.
Yeah, Laura Cullop.
Laura Cullop at Loon Organics talked a lot about how much she appreciates that you can use her seconds, because she's seen it from the CSA side of it and direct to consumer side of it and the wholesale side of it, and she says it's just really awesome to have a market for those seconds, those tomatoes or whatever that are maybe a little blemished, but they're still delicious. They just can be used in different ways. That sounds like that's a really great way to give these farmers a marketing option.
Yeah, I think being able to take in some seconds, something with slight blemishes, is a win for the farmers, of course, but it's a win for us too. We are managing tight budgets, so if we can get food at half price, but it's still 3/4 usable, it's a great solution for us, and gives those farmers a little security that their space and their energy is worth it. I mean, food waste is, of course, another conversation, but it's great for us to be able to work those in. So there are weeks like back to school week. We're not gonna peel all of the carrots, or we're not gonna peel all of the cucumbers. I know it's a wild week, so we're just not gonna hang on to seconds that week.
Right.
But a couple weeks later, if she wants to, bring an order of seconds bell peppers, and we'll have the time to carve those out. Of course, we need to know that they're seconds, and our staff needs to know that they're seconds in their coolers, so they can use that case first, or cut it into fajita strips to freeze for our burrito bar in January. It's all our staff they're really all pretty good sports about that, and they know, because I've communicated with the farmers, make sure it's obvious that these are seconds, so when they're scanning their coolers, they'll use those first. And then letting the staff know, if you see a thing of seconds, whatever it is, use those first, or they know these are for preserving, for processing, for pickling, for saucing, for freezing, whatever you have.
Do you have an estimate of, at your peak, what percentage of that food is local?
In September, I would say 80% of the fresh vegetables are local. Like I said, 100% of our beef is local. And I'd say overall of our food budget, we're about at 25 to 35%. Maybe 40% in a couple places.
Over the whole school year?
Over the whole school year.
Yeah.
That's locally sourced and raised foods.
Yeah.
That was our goal, was kind of to hit that 30% mark.
Yeah.
And I think we're flirting with that.
Wow. And obviously as you go deeper into the winter, that percentage drops. But
Yes.
To hit 80% in September really gets off to a good start.
Yeah, and the food, what we are required to serve, students kind of gets in the way of reaching that 100% mark. We can't serve students broccoli every day per those requirements, even though surprisingly I think students would eat broccoli every day. It's one of those things that seems to be well loved.
So
if it's done right.
Is it the USDA nutrition guidelines? Is that what it is? That gets in the way of that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
They exist for a good reason.
Yeah.
To make sure that students are getting a balanced and varied diet. But broccoli is a dark leafy category.
Yeah.
And we also need to have the red and orange category represented.
Okay.
And then everything else kind of falls into the other category.
Right.
So it's the things that grow really well. Like zucchini, cucumbers, green beans, they're all in the same category.
Yeah.
So just some quirks about how we can feed and what we're required to feed.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many farms are you dealing with now? How many, and what are the mostly produce, but it sounds like some sources of protein as well, some meat producing operations as well.
Yeah, we, over the course of the year, we are purchasing from about 15 Minnesota suppliers directly. So with about 5, 6, 7 of those being produce, we have 3 protein, and then we're also bringing in maple syrup and honey and dry beans. We just got some oats and flours that we're workshopping from a farm in northern Minnesota. So we're working our way to like all parts of the tray, and then we also, all 12 kitchens and cafeterias have a bulk milk machine. So they're all getting milk directly from Stony Creek Farm in Melrose.
So yeah, that was the question. It sounds like, I assume it's a certain circumference of this region here where we're at in west central Minnesota, or this area here. Things
like milk or things like dry beans, things that we don't have to, I guess they're consistent. You know, we can source from outside of this radius, but if you're dealing with the fresh produce, you know, it's kind of got to come in every week.
Right.
And I'd say the produce growers are within 15 to 30 minutes of a school. Our 3 districts kind of span that 30-mile, 25-mile range from the corner of Hutchinson all the way to Cokato Elementary. But yeah, from like the center point, I'd say 30 miles are all those produce farmers.
Okay.
Yeah. We also have an amazing amount of apple orchards around here.
Yeah.
So we're pulling apples in pretty much from the first week of school into December even. So we've got 3 or 4 orchards that we pull from too.
Do you visit every one of these farms, or what's the nature of the relationship you have, I guess, with them? I mean, you're obviously emailing and calling and whatever, but what's that?
My connection to the farms and the system of delivering produce has changed, of course, over the course of the 3 years. When we started, I picked up every box of produce and delivered it to the schools.
Wow.
I can't do that anymore, which is a good thing. We've grown past that. So farmers deliver their own produce now, but I do try to make it out to the farms. There's a couple that I did not stop at this season. It's an important piece of knowing what their farms look like. I mean, both in because I love farms and I want to grow that relationship with the people that we purchase from, and in reverse, they want to know, where they're selling stuff to. But we have a strong interest in food safety too. So when we're feeding as many students as we are, it's important to kind of make sure all of your boxes are checked, and things are coming in right. Yeah. And when we haven't had any issues, but if that were the case, it's nice to be able to say, well, I've seen their pack shed, or I've seen their delivery vehicle. Everything looks great. So what's going on here? And we can dig into it. So I think the farm visits are great. I hit the ones, kind of closer to where I work most often. If I'm, flying past their farm and they've got 2 more boxes of cauliflower available today, I'm going to pick them up. And it's just like my way of checking in and saying thanks and making sure then that I touch base in the kitchens.
Well, you kind of have to be the person who vouches to the staff and to the schools and to the nutritionists, and that these farms are doing what they should be doing and that kind of thing.
We do have procurement standards, so we're making sure that the farmers either have a food safety plan or food safety awareness of how things flow through their farms. Some of these farms are really small, and I know there's just one person harvesting, washing, and bagging, and I know that person well because I've had a relationship with him as a grower in this community, so that it feels good. Then being able to share that with our staff is really invaluable. We have also brought our staff to a few of these farms, so it's good for them to get out and see, and it actually, this is amazing. This is a real operation.
Right.
They're growing a ton of food.
In Minnesota.
In Minnesota, yes, I know. I think it was 2021. It was the spring of 2022, actually. We were able to get some overwintered spinach in April from a farm. And so that year, our local farm school features of fresh food went from April, all the way until October or November.
Right.
That was great.
Yeah.
You can do it here. And especially for those farms that maybe have an interest in, covered space or kind of playing with those shoulder seasons, schools are a great spot for them to think about selling to. A lot of schools want that April and May and that September, October, November.
Yeah. What struck me when I toured the kitchen there at the Hutchinson School was it seemed to be a real combination of pretty, how do I say this, formalized standards. You had everything from the boxes had stickers on them showing down to which plot and which hoop house they came from. So you could, if there was ever any problem, you could trace it back. Very specific kind of, formalized system of sourcing that food, but also a combination of informal relationships. It seems like there seems to be a balance there.
There is a good balance there. Yeah, we have to take things really seriously, and because we're working in the public world and using public dollars, like everything has to be very controlled. Everything has to be very well documented. And at the heart of this is about building relationships with your community members, sharing food with your community. And so it's a good balance of both of those things. Each farmer is a little different. Their labels are going to look a little different. All I need to know is that they know where this food came from, and we have that somewhere in our possession, whether it's produce or meat. Best practice is going to be that we can, if anything were to happen on our end or on the farms, that we can trace it back. We know which day that was served, which grades got it, maybe, which students would be at risk of anything. That's never happened, but it's just, it's good practice. We have to kind of be really serious about that documentation piece and what we bring in. And that helps our kitchen staff also just know they're being responsible and respectful. And
because I've seen this before with some initiatives like this, in that there's some people who in the school, maybe some administrative officials at the school district, who get really excited about this, but it's the staff who have to serve that food and prepare it day in and day out, and so they have to have a good attitude about it and a buy-in, or it's not going to wash.
They have a hard job. Schools are a really great place to be. They can also be a really challenging place to be. They can be loud, and they're under the pressure of tight schedules to get everything in a day. And they are really like heroes day in and day out. And when they are at their best, I never expect everybody to be super jazzed about serving cabbage again, you know. But you can see the difference when the staff does engage with the students and shares a story. Or there was a day that the coleslaw was a little bit heavy on the red cabbage, so it kind of turned out pink, and the students kind of flip. It's like, whoa, this coleslaw looks different. And it's pink of all things. And it was just our food service staff that day engaged with the student, told her why, the farmers had a lot of red cabbage this week, and that's what we had, so this is what it looks like. But I think you should try it. It tastes the same, and she came back with an empty tray and a big thumbs up. And it was because our employee was able to take the time and had the energy and knew why also that they had so much red cabbage. It might come in looking different each week, and that staff person had the energy to engage with that student and share that story. And now that student knows it might look purple this week, or it might be green. We don't know.
So I don't know if this is something you have been able to look at, or if anybody else has. Has there been any, and you're really still in the early stages of all this, but has there been any attempt to kind of quantify financially what kind of boost this is for the local farm economy, as far as, you're providing a market for more than a dozen farms, and I don't know. Has there been any? Do you know? Has there been any research on that? Kind of what is a boost for the local ag economy for something like this?
I don't know if anybody's tracking that. What I do know is that I hear directly from the farmers, especially the ones like the half a dozen or so that we use weekly on a very regular basis, that this program has made all the difference in their bottom lines. Or they used to have a really diverse wholesale makeup of their produce sales, and now the school is the biggest or the only. It's all about just having that working relationship, and that trust and that open line of communication, where it's wild that the school can be such a key purchasing partner for those seasonal farms when we aren't even in school for a bulk of that growing season. And for us to be the largest buyer, I think it's awesome, and it shows what you can do when you can work together, with your community. I don't know what the figure is, but I think, they say every dollar that you spend locally, turns into whatever it is,
Right.
2 or 3 or 4, whether it's 2 times or 4 times or 8 times or only 1.5, it just feels good.
Yeah.
It feels right. And what we learned when the supply chain was disrupted is that we would order things from our truck and something different would come. They just substitute you something different. And it was the farmers here locally. When we ordered broccoli, we got broccoli. When we ordered ground beef, we got ground beef. And having that direct communication and that really local system of food production is what was more resilient and was what was more trustworthy. And it felt especially good in that moment to really put all of our energy there. So I credit the pandemic for pushing us in that direction faster, because we had to get what we needed to serve the students, and then we just didn't go back. So, of course, we still order a lot of staples and frozen foods from the truck, and we lean on that heavily in the winter months. But, yeah, it just feels right. Maybe that is because I'm a farmer in my heart, but also I think the parents like it, the students like it, the teachers love it, the cafeterias smell good. It is extra work, but it still feels like the right kind of work. This year I'm excited to get into all the kindergarten classrooms in all of the 3 districts, and we're going to just kind of share what we're excited about that's going on in the cafeteria, and then put out the monthly menu. And then say, let's choose 3 things, that you as a class, want to learn more about or try. And if 20 of the 25 of you in this classroom taste it, we'll say, we met that goal. We also participate in the Harvest of the Month program. So getting some fun facts and marketing about what we're featuring that month, maybe. That's a Minnesota item. We pass out stickers in the cafeteria to get kids to try them. So letting them collect 8 stickers, and letting them know, this is the beef day.
Yeah.
You can get your beef. I tried Minnesota beef sticker today. So I'll be doing that work with the kindergarten classes to just kind of from the foundation, let them know what's going on in farm to school, and hoping that we can kind of cultivate this season of their lives where they feel confident to reach for those foods on the line, and to know that the students are maybe not aware. It's really easy to just be a student, flow through the hallways, and maybe not hear or not read the monitor, or you're just maybe not into food and you don't know that it tastes different. It's if we're not telling that story, and we're not reaching the students in their classrooms, we're missing an opportunity. And I agree. The cafeteria is kind of loud. It's kind of fun. It's their social hour, as it should be. And so it's hard to tell that story in the lunchroom sometimes. I'm looking forward to, and I think it is the biggest challenge of this program, and we're just kind of getting to that point where we're able to get into that classroom and tell the story of community connection through food and just celebrate it.
I know you've been very active with the Land Stewardship Project and some of our allies in going to the legislature and talking to lawmakers about farm to school, and testifying and helping push for some funding to be passed and some support for this thing. And so we've seen just in the past couple legislative sessions seems like a lot of progress in that area. How key is that support and that funding from the state level for schools to even think of this, or for farmers to think about getting involved in something like this?
I can only speak for the districts that I work for, that this funding has been important. It's been like the legs that we stand on to reach out and try new things. We rely on that grant funding to cover a percentage of our purchases. And when you're talking about protein specifically, there's a big price gap. In a perfect world, we'd just be able to afford good food for the kids and for ourselves at home, you know?
You mean a price gap between if you just buy it off the Cisco truck and getting it locally? That's a huge price gap.
Yep. There are all sorts of, they call them entitlement dollars for school nutrition programs. Some things they get for free. You just need to like survey and say like we need X amount. So that's what we're up against. And what we lose some of our entitlement dollars by choosing to purchase locally. So we need to be really smart about how we use our money. Or if we're not going to use it for beef, then maybe we got to find some cheese that we can bring in through the commodity system, or some beans. Yeah, we rely on that public support, that public funding. I think what's important is for the state to show kind of like a permanent level of commitment, and kind of define their commitment to farm to school funding more than 1 or 2 years at a time. I think the farmers could really get on board with selling into institutions like farm to school and early care if they knew that this funding was going to be available for schools. It does the farmers no good if we have just a banner year of supporting them and then 2 years later the funding is cut. It's really disruptive for small farms. And I have heard from a few of the growers like, well, we would buy a carrot harvester and washer if we knew this was part of our 10-year plan. You can tell us it's a part of your 1 or 2 year plan, but we don't really know. And I empathize. It's a hard decision.
Yeah.
These are long-term systems, that we want to work on. And being 3 years into it and looking at where we started and where we are, it's great. But it still feels a little unsteady.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about farm to school is kind of no matter at which scale a district wants to do it or is able to do it, grant or no grant, there's an important story to tell there. I think that will continue, but if we want to make a larger impact on agriculture and what the land is set up to look like, it's a good avenue for us to just like put our public energy and our public dollars into. We not only lift up the farmers and make sure they have a viable local avenue to sell, but we get the kids some awesome nutrition.
Right.
It's a no-brainer to me.
What advice would you give to a school district and maybe to a farmer who is interested in getting something like this going in their community? What would be some of the first steps?
I think for a school district that has interest is to set it as a priority to have somebody like me working for their food service department to make those connections. There's a lot of things at play that a food director or another kitchen staff doesn't have maybe the time and flexibility for, and it doesn't have to be every district in this for their own. Our districts are a perfect example, and I think that's why we've had success, is because they can share the burden, for lack of a better word, of my position. We have the same farmers can access all of our districts, and that's no different than, say, Western Minnesota. Are there 4 or 5 small districts that could share a very part-time person to just get this off the ground? I think so. Just west of the metro, are there 3 or 4 towns that could share somebody like me? Absolutely. And the deal is there's no farm to school program that's going to look the same as ours because they aren't going to have the same growers. But they can, with that person's help and dedicated time, I think you can start to build a program that reflects your community and that's genuine to who you are and what your strengths are. If you're a farmer, I think back to when Andy and I were starting Rebel Soil, and it was intimidating to cold call restaurants, and I would search the restaurant on the internet to see if I could find a picture of the chef so I knew what they looked like.
See if they were friendly looking.
Yeah. School nutrition is such a different field. Everybody loves kids, and everybody has, like, they want what's best. And if their participation rates increase because they have a farmer, selling high quality food that's willing to come into the cafeteria and be the hype person for butternut squash, that's a win completely. So it's an easier, like, cold call is all I want to say. It's less intimidating. They have very different things to consider than a restaurant, but also a lot of that is potential. Those are opportunities. If you're looking to get started and you want to get into farm to school as a grower, the child nutrition director is your contact person. And the things to consider are, what do you think students are going to love? What foods are going to be easy to sell to students? And what ingredients are low labor on the kitchen side? And that's where you start. If you also have something you're really good at, or you have the space and capacity on your farm to grow, if you do broccoli really well, or you do cabbage really well, or you do salad radishes really well, go for it. Start with one thing. If we're all just playing on our strengths, I think any working relationship will thrive.
For more information on farm to school initiatives, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 322 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. And word of mouth is the best way to spread the news about our podcast. If you like what you hear, tell at least one person about LSP's Ear to the Ground. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.